Let's go. Let's go. Welcome back to another episode on the Dominance Academy. I'm your host, Mr. Justin. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about the daddy dominant role. Because there's a lot of dominance. Um, and I've noticed actually the more a guy spends in the lifestyle, the less defined he is. So guys who are first into this sort of thing, they're really keen on figuring out what their labels are. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about one label in particular, which is the daddy dom. It's a very common dominant. But I know some guys who have been in the lifestyle for like shit, I don't know, 30 years or something like that. And they don't label themselves as anything, really. They just say I am who I am, and they are that thing. And then other people who are more concerned with labels and such will say, "Oh, well, you're actually like this, you're like that," but they themselves don't identify as any sort of label. They're like beyond labels. Almost like Yoda probably doesn't refer to himself as a Jedi. He's just Yoda. So I think it's kind of like that. So I think in the daddy dynamic, um, a lot of the daddy dynamic will be or become instinctive and intuitive to most daddy doms. Okay. So it's like it's part of your natural thing to care. I think that is one of the main tenets, right? So we're getting into this daddy dom thing. I'm gonna not make this super long, but so I think a major aspect of a dom who could possibly be a daddy dominant, they are they have like part of them has a very caring attitude. Like they want to see the best for their submissive, and they act like a father would. So how are fathers, right? They're strong, they're guides. They have the best interests in mind for their child. Um, they have their children do things that maybe they don't want to do, but it's good for them in the long run. Uh, all sorts of stuff. Sometimes they're strict. Okay. So to help guide, teach, advise, nurture, and give their little, right? Because I was like on the opposite side of the daddy dom are submissives who characterize themselves as littles, and and you probably come across women who are like this in real life, where they kind of act a little childish. There's also middles. Okay, so a little is someone who acts very young, and you might see these people in real life in your regular like vanilla world, where they kind of act much they may act much younger than what they actually are. And I just want to make okay. All right. I thought it was muted. I had to check that shit. Last time I started my stream, I was muted. So what's up, King Solar Power? Good to see you, man. So so the opposite of the daddy dom is the little. And sometimes there are middles. Okay. So a middle is a woman who sort of acts like a teenager. So a teenager type where you need a little bit more firm guidance or a little bit more lax guidance. Okay. So sometimes with a teenager, you just kind of have to let them figure some shit out and let them, scrape their knees, so to speak. And other times you got to grab them by the neck and sit them down and say, hey, you're fucking up. This is what you need to be doing right now, and stop that dumb shit over there. So there's like that balance. And sometimes middles will act out to get attention, the way much like a teenager would. So just keep that in mind. And so for most new daddy doms, these qualities will already exist as part of their natural generic makeup, like a jigsaw puzzle in a box. The pieces are already there, and they just need piecing together to see the bigger picture and give meaning and some kind of a semblance to their new role and responsibilities. So the fundamental aspects, as in any power exchange relationship, and I think that's another chapter that I should make a video on, which is just basic understanding of what the hell power dynamics are. And in a nutshell, it's an exchange, it's a power exchange. So it's one person giving over power, another person taking responsibility for the power. And sometimes there's a lot of negotiation, sometimes there's a little negotiation, sometimes there's no negotiation at all. But we'll get into that in another video. Um, but so in in other like as in other power exchange relationships, there's rules, there's structure, there's guidelines, there's boundaries, limits, there's discipline, and every little will be unique in her individual qualities. But these should present and apply to all daddy dom little girl uh, relationships or scenarios. For any DS relationship to be successful, there must be some basic guidelines in its place. So it's true that no two relationships will share the same dynamic, but some basic agreements must exist. Without these, you'll go outside the boundaries of the dynamic and what a DS relationship is considered to be. Each couple should have their own set of guidelines, but feel some are universal. Um, and I'm reading some of these notes from a website called Dominant Life on a website called Tumbex, Tumbex. So these are just really great notes that this person put together. And so essentially, um, there has to be like set guidelines, there has to be set rules, there has to be set understandings because you're dealing with very distinct roles. And so when someone assumes a distinct role, such as not just a dominant, but you're a daddy dominant, so it's got a style to it. And it's not they're just a submissive, they're a little submissive or a middle submissive. And that has a certain style to it. And so there's certain types of behaviors, there's certain expectations, there's certain rules. It's kind of like role play, but role play is different in the sense that you're just assuming a whole new character. This is kind of like you're taking a very real aspect of yourself and sort of like turning it up a little bit and letting it come out and letting it flourish more. So maybe that'll give you like a better idea. So there's typically no like physical, mental, or emotional harm. Um, but there's also plenty of discipline, corrective behavior, um, and punishments that fit the bill. And pain may be used as punishment for correcting behavior or pleasure, but it's not the sole purpose of the relationship. So there are some DS relationships where pain and punishment take a very much of a front seat in the situation, and that becomes like a cornerstone in their dynamic. And this is fine for those types of couples. That's typically not going to find itself in a daddy dom little girl dynamic, because caretaking is more of what the central vibe is. And so you're not going to see that much I think physical punishment, or like psychological, excuse me, long day. So what happens in these in these dynamics is that there's agreed upon limits between the two partners. So these are different from their own personal limits. They're prearranged set limits that both partners agree to. So, for example, no third parties are to be involved in the relationship under any circumstances, or a limited number of people that are allowed to participate in a scene. So it's important to discuss this sort of thing before the DS relationship begins. And these lines are never to be crossed without at least some discussion beforehand. Boundaries can do change over time as relationships progress. So maybe after a couple of years, they might go back to that limit that's in like a relationship limit, not a personal limit, but a relationship limit, and then say, well, our feelings have kind of changed and we're very loyal and very committed to each other. Um, let's talk about bringing a third party into the mix every now and then. And then that gets negotiated or discussed however you want to do it. There's always safe words. All submissives, no matter if they're in a DDLG situation or something else, all submissives should have safe words. And it's something that I believe should be like a one or two syllable word. It shouldn't be something long that's hard to get out if you are in pain or something like that. And typically, words like stop or ouch are really bad safe words. It should be something that is completely left field. Um, I like the use of like fruit names or vegetable names. That seems to work really well just because it's not the sort of word that you would ever see popping up in the bedroom, or in a dungeon or something like that. So just try to use simple and easy stuff. A lot of people use colors. So it's really common for people to use red, meaning stop, yellow means like back off, and green is okay. There's communication. Obviously, both partners must have clear communication about what's going on. And the submissive needs to be open about their feelings, and the dominant must be receptive to this. Like going back to the whole dominant thing that I was talking about before, about just like, oh, I give the orders, you listen, and that's the end of it. Part of the magic in DS relationships is that there is open communication. Like that's pretty much a hallmark of DS relationships. And it's about creating these stages to open up. And when the submissive does this more and can trust that you will hold whatever this is and not abuse it or not use it to your advantage or shame it or judge it or whatever, that gives them more trust in you and your leadership. And then the more trust they have, the more submissive they can be. Because they might be able to put on an act of submission to a certain degree that is satisfactory, but to have that deep emotional submission where, like, I trust this dominant with my will, that requires a very high level of trust on an emotional level. And that comes with setting a stage that is uh void of judgment. What's going, Brian the man? Appreciate you, man. All right, so let me see here. Um, rules, rewards, and punishments. Now, this is, I would say, pretty standard amongst a lot of DS relationships. This is like, this is the bread and butter of a lot of functioning systems. Because what this does, what the rules, rewards, and punishments do, is that it's a reflection of the program. It's like what keeps people on keeps people on the straight and narrow, both the dom and the submissive. So it's crucial. It's a crucial part of the relationship and one where a lot of issues and problems arise. So for example, like overcorrecting for infractions, non-compliance to rewards, or praise for the sub, and ignoring minor misdemeanors or ignoring rules that have been deliberately broken. So it's important that if you have a rule and it gets broken, you need to uphold it. Like you can't just like let it slide. You at least need to have a discussion about it. So this has to happen. But also like don't overcorrect for infractions. And non-compliance to rewards or praise for the sub is just really bad practice as well. The submissive agrees to obey her rules and follow the guidelines. The dominant agrees to discipline and correct behavior and follow protocol. This is the agreement and one that must be followed with severe consistency. Now, of course, we're all human and we're going to screw up here and there on both sides of the slash, but you have to do your best to remain consistent as the dominant. Without consistency, a submissive that will quickly lose respect, and or at least they'll lose their submissive edge, if that makes any sense. So one mistake that's often made is the overuse of rules. So having too many rules that the dom cannot remember or the sub cannot remember gets really frustrating. It gets frustrating for both parts and it can confuse the submissive. It's far better in the beginning of the relationship to have fewer rules rather than to have too many. And as the relationship develops and you've kind of like set these rules and they're being followed, then you can just add one or two more, and then you add one or two more, and then you go on that way. So, and you just expand on it over time. Um, in the world of overcorrecting for every minor infraction is also a very poor practice. So this will make the sub feel worthless, and she will only do what is required of her for fear of reprisal. So um, you don't want to be super anal about everything, or super precise, because every little minor thing, if you're attending to them, will it could possibly like give her a complex that she's never doing anything right, and or will only get praised until after you've corrected her. So when she does something, it's not perfect, you correct her, then you get praised. So it's like setting this cycle up where she's no good until you've corrected her, then she gets praise. And that's not really the best way to do it. Um, like even if it's like if you're like a coach on a sports team for like kids, it's like even though they're not playing perfectly, you're still going to encourage them. You're still going to tell them good job because you see their effort. And it's in the same way you see the effort, that's when you show that the recognition and the acknowledgement of them trying. Even if it slips a little bit or isn't directly on target, you can slowly correct that over time, but don't like jump on every little thing each and every time. And it can get daunting. So, um, she will have over time, because like you're basically like chipping away the fun out of it, and she'll have no desire to please the dom because you've squeezed out all the joy. And eventually the dom will realize he has little to no control over her and the relationship crumbles. So you don't want to fall into the trap of overcorrecting, overcorrecting, overcorrecting. Okay. Um, or you don't want to also fall into the trap of having too many rules. Okay. So another one is that punishments do not have to equate to pain. So for a masochistic submissive, she will most likely act out to receive a punishment, as she will see it as more of a reward. Okay. So if you've got a submissive who enjoys pain, you can't necessarily give them pain that they like, or you can't give them pain at all because this is something they enjoy. Now, I said pain that they like. Let's just say that they like to be spanked. They enjoy spanking kind of pain, but they don't like having the bottom of their feet pained. That's a pain that they don't like. They don't like, say, their nipples being pinched really hard, or they don't like the feeling of tight rope on their skin, or they don't like their hair being pulled. There's a number of physical types of pain that they don't like. Okay, maybe what's that wheel called? Shit, I can't remember the name of the wheel, but it's this medical device actually from like a long time ago, and it's this long, it's this handle, and on the end it looks like a spur, like a cowboy spur, and it was used a long time ago to test if, say, a patient who might have had nerve damage can feel the spiky wheel going over their skin. and it had like sharp points on it. Like if you press hard enough, it could puncture the skin, but they would just gently roll it over the skin. And if the patient could feel the little spikes, then their nerves were healing. And that has turned into this wheel has turned into a play item. So let's say she doesn't like that stuff, and that's something you're now using in your repertoire to use as punishment towards a masochist who likes pain, but not that kind of pain. Another way to deal with a masochist um, is to not give them pain at all. And so she acts out in hopes of receiving a spanking, but instead you have her sit in the corner, or you have her write lines, or you have her do something that she absolutely does not like to do. And that's specific to each sub. But like for example, like removal of privileges, a cleaning task that she doesn't like, writing lines. Um, I've so like a type of pain, like I've stepped on Legos before. They're really painful. And this one time I didn't like what was going on. So I spread out some Legos on the floor and I had her stand on the Legos barefoot. And she lasted about 15 seconds before it was time to come off. But the message was made clear. Let's see here. So yeah, going back to like non-painful uh, uh, punishments, there's a lot of like mental or menial tasks that you can do. That's save the more severe methods for deliberate infractions, where they're deliberately like showing you, "Daddy, I'm breaking the rules. Look at me breaking the rules." Like that's when a more severe punishment comes into play. So, punishment should be used to correct an infraction or a lack of action. Never, ever punish out of anger or frustration or retaliation. So, uh, just recently, my submissive, she spoke in a way that was definitely unacceptable. And I'm not sure if she did it on purpose or if she was just playing around, but in either case, she overstepped a boundary and it frustrated me. And I knew that it frustrated me. And I knew also that I had to just because I didn't want to punish her out of anger. I needed to, I mean, I didn't really get angry, but I didn't want to punish her out of frustration or annoyance in my case. And so therefore I let that like subside. And then that allows me to think more clearly of like, okay, well, how am I going to properly deal with this? What was the infraction and what is a suitable punishment? And she knows it's coming, right? She just doesn't know what it is. So understand that like punishment should never come about when you are angry or upset or frustrated, and never use punishment as retaliation, right? Just in the same way that you would never retaliate against a child, you're not going to do the same thing in a DDLG situation. And real injury can occur if you're angry. Safe words can be nullified and limits will cease to exist. So just understand that a dom that punishes in anger is on a road to an abusive relationship. And it's very difficult to have empathy when one is angry. So like if you're frustrated or you're angry, take a time out and reflect on what was going on. Let your emotions pass through and just forget about them, right? And just understand that inflicting pain is not the goal. The pain in pain punishments, it's there to drive a message. It's one of a teaching tool used by the dom to ensure that rules and protocols are adhered to. So, rewards show a sub. We can talk about rewards now. Rewards show the sub that the dom is pleased. Now, this comes down to knowing what your sub likes. So there's no sense in, say, taking her to ice cream if she's lactose intolerant. There's no sense in taking her to a picnic if she doesn't like the great outdoors. So I hope that makes sense. You have to know what her likes are and the things that she appreciates, and then use those things as rewards. And there might be little things that she really likes, and there could be medium sized and big things that she likes. And depending on how her behavior is, or whether she's, say, learning a new skill that she wanted to learn but didn't have the impetus to learn, and through your guidance, you have her on a program to learning that new thing. Like, let's say it's learning a new language or something, and she shows progress and she's working really hard. Like, that to me deserves a large reward. So at that point, it would be like, okay, go throw on a nice dress. We're going to have a really nice dinner at this, like, you know, burlesque style restaurant. And there's going to be like beautiful women there with pasties on, and like old timey music and fantastic wine and good food, and make it into like a celebration of her ability to stay on task and to pushing herself and staying consistent and growing. Like, that's, and make it known, like, hey, listen, you're getting this because you are showing this. And then, and explanation, I'm a huge fan of explanation. So there's one thing, like, just imagine like in the like a scenario with like a child and a parent. The child fucks up, and the kid knows they fucked up, but the parent just comes over and punishes them. Now, take that scenario versus the child knows they fucked up, the parent comes over, sits them down, explains what went wrong, and explains what that they're going to get punished, and then explains the punishment, and then does the punishment. And then afterwards makes them feel better, right? Having like a little bit of aftercare of some sort. So it's like they get a lecture, they get berated, they get spanked or whatever. And then after that, it's like, okay, come into the kitchen, I'll make you a Nutella sandwich. I'll give you some ice cream or whatever. Okay. It's in the same sort of thing where they fuck up, you sit them down and you tell them what the infraction was. Then you tell them they're going to be punished. And then you explain what the punishment is. So they have a great understanding of why this is happening. In the same sense, you need to deliver rewards in the same way. So when they're consistent and they're doing a certain thing, or they're progressing along a certain objective, and their goals are being met, or whatever you have going on in your program, that's when you pull them aside, you sit them down, you tell them and give them that verbal recognition that they're doing a really good job, and as a result, they're getting reward of X, and that makes it that much more powerful. Or like in a job scenario where you're doing your work, you're working really hard, your boss comes over and just says, "Hey, Bob, lunch is on me." You'd be like, "All right, great, cool." But you have no idea why. Versus you're crunching away, you're working really hard, your boss comes over and says, "Hey, Bob, you've been cranking ass for weeks here, and I've been watching your progress steadily go through the roof. You've been really busted ass. I love what you're doing here. Lunch is on me." Okay. Or, take the day off or whatever. Having an explanation for the reward is almost as great as the reward itself. And actually, when brought together with the reward, makes the reward even more powerful. So keep that in mind. So it's a way to show that you as the Dom are pleased. It's a way of showing love and that he cares for her well-being. It acknowledges her proper behavior and reinforces the proper behavior. So if you're into DS relationships, I would suggest you read some of Skinner's work. Okay, Skinner was real big in the behavioral psychology world. So just pick up some of his work, understand what he was studying, and look at some of the things that he did. And positive and negative reinforcement are incredibly powerful, if used properly. So when you do things like rewards or punishments, it's used to strengthen something. So in this, it's how the dominant creates the willingness in a submissive to want to please him. So again, with that guy who's working hard at his job, the boss comes over, gives him a reward, explains why he's getting the reward, that's going to make the employee work even harder and perhaps even happier because they're being recognized. And they're like, wow, I feel really good. Like the boss is noticing me, right? He made it a note to come over and personally congratulate me, lift me up, and then give me, a prize on top of that. So keep that in mind. And then once they're happier, a happy sub will want to keep making her dom happy. And they'll make that happiness a number one priority and avoid any action that may result in disappointment. Because, once that's there, once you've established that dynamic, disappointment is like one of the most crushing feelings. And I know this as an actual father, and I know this as a dom who has a sub. Disappointment is huge. I would say disappointment is probably more influential than the hardest spanking, especially if they're looking up to you, especially if they love you. It's it can be gut wrenching. So just keep all that in mind about positive reinforcement. From the perspective of the daddy dom, you need to listen to your little or your middle. Let her talk and do not interrupt her when she speaks, or don't be too hasty when in responding, and definitely don't judge what she's saying. Okay. Just in the same way a father would talk with a daughter, you just want to let them open up. And you don't want to immediately jump on advice or immediately jump on your criticism or immediately jump on judgment. Just let it be. Okay. And the more they are allowed to open up to you, they gain trust. They trust you with their feelings and their thoughts. And they learn that, expressing their feelings isn't a danger. And then with that starts growing more and more respect. So you treat her with that kind of respect and dignity, and allow her voice and opinions. And this should be guided in a way that is conducive to your program. So, and that's down to like every dom's preference. So it's how it's presented. Okay. And if that's important to you, then it's important to you. If it's not important to you, then, you're not going to worry about how it's delivered. You just want them to just be able to spew, right? So allow her to participate in your activities, and show her that she is an integral part of the relationship, and her role is to follow daddy's direction and please him. And, but at the same time, it's not like she's beneath you. Like she doesn't like live under your shoe. She's your lover, she's your companion, and she is there to serve, but she's not like a cockroach under your foot. All right. This is not someone that you look down on like they're a piece of junk. It's someone that serves you, and therefore you must take care of the things that take care of you, right? Because if they break down, then you don't get served. So you have to take care of that thing that's serving you. Yes. Let me just see here. What's up, Rickster? Thanks for popping in. Appreciate you. So when you've set this up, okay, when she pleases you, she's going to expect to be rewarded. So again, like going back to the beginning with the things that I was talking about, like remembering, like not having too much stuff to remember, then it'll allow you to kind of maintain this. So you have to like be observant of like when she's doing something that pleases you, she's going to expect some kind of reward. And when she displeases you or fails you in any kind of way, then a consequence is what she expects. And she needs to be brought to awareness of these things, which is like, I said, like the why, explaining the why is really, really important. So she needs to be brought to awareness, and she needs to be corrected and guided by you and shown how to act and what is and is not acceptable. So a little will genuinely care and want to please her daddy, not out of fear, but out of love. and she wants to give her daddy pleasure and does not want to disappoint him ever, provided you've set up the trust and the non-judgment and a set of rules that's not freaking crazy and really hard to remember. That desire to please, while at the same time you're reinforcing it with positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement and so on. She'll want to not fuck up. She'll want to please you, and she'll feel really bad when she has displeased you. It's just important to not take advantage of that. It's important to not take advantage of the times when she fucks up. It's just deliver the appropriate response and then pick her back up and say, okay, come on, dust off your knees. Let's go. Alita will take great pleasure from the fact that she's pleased her daddy and when daddy is proud of her. So, understand that like I said, disappointment is a really powerful thing that can happen in a daddy dom little girl situation or a middle girl situation. Disappointment is huge, but pride is on the other side of that. Having pride in her and in her abilities and in her growth is just as powerful, but it's just coming from the other side. And when a sub, I mean, I guess you're going to have to talk to a sub to really get their understanding of it, but from what I've seen, they really light up when they get the genuine sensation that you are proud of them and that they're doing a good job. It just fills them up with a glow. And it's just great to see. It's great to see them really feeling themselves, but not from some sort of egotistical external thing. It's feeling themselves based on something deeply internal. And this is something that you can lead them to, is feeling that my daddy's proud of me. And what that does is it uplifts their own self-esteem, and it creates a sense of pride within themselves. And then they become stronger in that sense, stronger deep within. So when when you're operating, there's just a lot of things that you need to consider. And it's very important that as a dom, as a daddy dom or whatever kind of dom you are, to have good control of your emotions. I think that's one of the biggest things that a dom could do to mess up his situation, is to be too emotional, to be too knee-jerk reactionary. And that will screw things up and throw things off track faster than anything else. It like I really don't know how to explain it any better than that. But it's really poisonous. So just remember that, because when you have that emotional control, that's when you're able to produce all the things that I was just talking about. Where you're able to produce this daddy dom little scenario where you can have a simple set of rules that's easy to maintain, that you can support with proper punishments, which requires proper mindfulness and a decent amount of observing the situation from the conductor's podium. All right. Like I tell my guys to be sitting 12 inches up and 12 inches back from your scenario. So if you just imagine in every instance in your relationship, I mean, unless you will it to do otherwise, you are 12 inches up and 12 inches back. It's like you're there, but you're not there. That's basically how you're supposed to be. Well, how I personally believe that you're supposed to be running things, because it gives you just enough detachment to not get embroiled in stuff. And then it also grants you the ability to, if you do want to move 12 inches forward and 12 inches down, it gives you the ability to do that. You have that flexibility to move. And if you feel like being immersed, then you can be, if you want to be like eye to eye in that sense. But other than that, I would suggest maintaining that 12 inches up, 12 inches back sort of idea where you're just slightly detached. And this keeps your own emotions in check. It prevents things from getting out of hand. It prevents you from having reactions to things. And it allows you the space to have responses to things. And when you're responding, that's when you're able to think clearly. And that's what happened with me not too long ago, where I I chose to control myself from having a reaction, and I chose to just give myself a minute, and then I could respond properly. All right. Now I was still frustrated, but it wasn't acting from the frustration. And that's the big difference. And so you're acting from, now you're thinking about your constitution. You're thinking about the frameworks and operating from them, not operating from how you feel. So there could be, like, say, a law, like imagine, and I know this does happen in real life and it's unfortunate, but imagine a law that's broken and the cop who upholds it starts getting emotional about the infraction of the law. And we've seen it go really poorly many times where the cops have become emotionally invested in that broken law, and they end up doing really heinous shit, sometimes killing people or just acting like total assholes. But the point is that you don't want to be like that. In an ideal sense, they would just uphold the law from a completely emotionless place. That would be the most ideal thing. And you just look at the paper. Okay, look, you broke this, this, this. This is the punishment. This. You do your thing. Okay, goodbye, and we're done. Like, it has no place for your feelings. That's the ideal scenario that I wish, how police operated, but they don't. But you don't want to be like that. You don't want to be like that in your dynamic. You don't want to be like that in just even your vanilla relationships, because it prevents you from thinking and acting clearly and cleanly. And if she is looking to you for leadership, right, so you get this little, okay, and they're little, like they're the ones who are allowed to be emotional. They're the ones who are allowed to be reactionary. They're the ones who you would at least expect them to be. Okay, sometimes they're going to be have unsure footing because they're feeling confused or uncertain, or um you know just feeling not grounded. If you're that way, how do you think it's going to make them feel if they're the ones following you? So it doesn't make sense. One of you has to be more in control, more grounded, more relaxed, and the one who's thinking more clearly in every situation. So you have to just maintain that. You have to really understand that. Like, you can't get into it with them, because it will lead to further destruction. It will lead to a dismantling of things where she loses trust in you. And that comes from not having that solid foundation within yourself, where you are absolutely trusting your program, you're trusting your constitution, you believe in yourself, you believe in your judgment. You're not faltering, going back and forth. Like, could you imagine if you have this sub and she does something wrong, and then the dom punishes her for it, but then he's not sure if he should or shouldn't, because maybe if he punishes her, she might get upset and not like him anymore. So that worry causes his behavior to falter or come off weird or uncertain. Then that's going to definitely cause her to have a certain feeling, a reactionary feeling. And when I paint it like that, I hope you can see how how dangerous that is versus the sub screws up, the dom sees the infraction, delivers a punishment that's appropriate, then guides the behavior towards what is expected, right? So, because you don't want to just deliver the punishment and say, don't do that again. It's don't do that again. And this is what I expect. Come, let me show you. So you act as the guide, right? You want to make them feel good and say, this is what I want to see. This is what I want to hear. And then you can explain, this is what good girls get. Good girls get hugs. Good girls get kisses. Good girls get, whatever it is that they're after, whatever makes them feel good. This is what good girls get. And good girls follow the rules. Now, do you want to be a good girl? Do you want to be a bad girl? And sometimes good girls like to be bad girls. That's just the way it goes sometimes. I know my sub does. She likes to be naughty sometimes. And sometimes it annoys me. And then I have to deal with it. So and sometimes I would rather not deal with it, but I have to deal with it because I need to maintain that consistency like I did before. Now, is it stuff that I could probably let slide? Yeah, because it doesn't actually affect me. It doesn't affect me emotionally or deeply or anything like that. It's not going to ruin my day. It's not going to throw me off. It's not going to do anything to me. But if so, I'm like my human side. If I let, like, it can't affect it. But on my Dom side, the Domness of me, if I let it slide on that end, then that's where I'm going to start creating inconsistencies. So even if I'm not feeling like I want to deal with this, I have to deal with it in order to maintain the overall picture. You want to keep that picture going. And, you know, truth be said, this lifestyle might not be cut out for everyone because it's something you have to maintain all the time. All the time. And sure, there's like little breaks in between or whatever, but for the most part, it's constant management, whether she's good or bad. Because if she's good and progressing, you need to manage that as well so that she continues to be good and progressing. If she's being naughty, then you have to correct that and catch that and redirect it and punish it and get that moving into the right direction. So I know this is this sort of lifestyle is appealing to many, and let me say this, the rewards are fantastic in terms of like a relationship sense because the trust that gets developed is a lot stronger than the trust that you would find in vanilla relationships. They might say, hey, that's fucking bullshit, Justin. You don't know what you're talking about. Well, there's been a number of studies done on these things. And what they've done is they studied the stress levels and through, I don't know what testing they did with couples to judge trust, but they did like two groups, like, villa couples and BDSM couples. And they found that the stress levels in regular couples was higher and their trust levels were lower. And in the BDSM couples, the trust was higher and the stress was lower because they're constantly pushing the trust and the safety boundaries. They're constantly pushing this, whether it's emotional or physical. And therefore you can grow tremendous amount of trust in someone because they've had you strung up from the ceiling with a knife held to your throat or get put into like a giant vacuum bag. I could never do that shit. Holy hell. I don't know if you've ever seen these things before, but it's like a baggy sheet that's fit over a bed. And the person lies down on the bed. This sheet is fit over it, or they're like in it like a sandwich bag, basically. It's a giant vinyl sandwich bag. And there's a valve on the side. And they take a vacuum and attach it to that valve and suck out all the air. And the person who's in the bag, they have this little straw. I mean, the diameter of the straw is maybe about a half inch, maybe a length of like 3 inches, and that's all they breathe out of. They can't see, they can't hear, they can't do anything except breathe through this little tube. And their body is sucked down to the bed. They cannot move. And could you imagine the amount of trust that that must take? I think I'll probably lose my shit if somebody put me in that. That would be very scary. But yeah, fuck that. But there's people who do that, and amongst like other things that you can't even imagine. And but just to think, if that's something that happens regularly between a couple, imagine the level of trust. This is like circus performer level trust. Where you're like, yeah, there's no net, and I'm gonna toss you fucking 50 feet in the air, and I'm gonna catch your ass. And if I don't, you're dead. Like literally dead. And there's like, acrobatic couples who like do this shit like 100 feet off the ground. That trust is not what's found in like regular relationships because there's nothing ever pushed. They come in, they're like, hey, I'm good looking, you're good looking, we both have jobs, we kind of like each other, we enjoy having sex, let's do this. And then all kinds of problems come up because no one talks about shit. No one talks about their fear. No one talks about their problems. No one's talked about the things that's happened to them. No one's talked about trauma. No one ever pushes anything that pushes comfort zones. I'm not saying nobody, but it's I would say it's not super common to push comfort zones purposely for the sole purpose of growth. Like what regular relationships are doing this on a regular basis? This is what happens in DS relationships. And it's hard fucking work, but the result is something that a level of trust that you won't experience otherwise. It's crazy. Like when you see this person and they are completely giving their trust in you on a level that they've never done so before. And you can feel this level of trust on you. It's like in your hands. Now it's your responsibility to care for this. Don't fuck it up because it's deeper and heavier than anything else. Anything else that would be found otherwise. It's a huge responsibility. But at the same time, it's like nothing you've ever tasted before. Nothing. So just keep that in mind that this isn't a game. This is not a game that you can play. Now, that's not to say that you can't be kinky. All right. That's not to say that, because there's plenty of people who are in vanilla relationships who can play with kink in various spaces, and they don't have to be in a DS relationship. They don't have to be a daddy dom. They don't, the person, the other woman doesn't have to be a little girl. They can just come into the bedroom and have kinky play, and that's totally fine. And it's not that big of a deal. Z, buddy, if this isn't the place for you, you don't have to be here. But please take it easy. There we go. So, oh shit, they were banned. I was just wanted to put them in timeout. Well, whatever. Anyways, so I'm gonna wrap this here. If you missed the full show, just catch it on the rewind. And I appreciate everyone who has stopped through for it. If you have any questions, feel free to email me at thedominanceacademy@gmail.com. And I do my first phone calls for free. We can talk about whatever. We can talk about your relationship. We can talk about dating. We can talk about DS situations. We can talk about your favorite toys, whatever you want to talk about. The first call is free. And, I'm here for you. So until next time, I'll catch y'all later.